already see it all around us. What you will come to learn over the next 75 minutes is how the architecture is informed and inspired by all of those other things. The industry, transportation, organizing, corruption, fire, music, art. All of it is alive and present
Corruption
in our city
in
today.
Chicago?
In every cityscape that we will see on
That's
this
hard
tour.
to believe.
We're just willing to take notice. So let's begin. We're going to begin by talking about this bridge straight in front of our heads. This is the Dusable Bridge at Michigan Avenue. It's a great place to start because it is named for our city's founder. It's the Dusable Bridge, named for Jean-Baptiste Dusable. Jean-Baptiste Dusable was not the first person to live on this land. We'll talk about our city's rich indigenous history a little bit later on in the tour. Jean-Baptiste Dusable was the first permanent non-native settler. He was a Haitian Creole immigrant who arrived in Chicago via New Orleans in the 1770s. He set up a fur trading post right here where present-day Michigan Avenue meets the Chicago River. Again, he's considered to be the father of our city, the founder of our town. We have many things named after him here. This bridge, Dusable Harbor, Dusable Park, as well as the Dusable Museum of African American History. Straight in front of us and up to the right, see a white building, looks like a wedding cake with a clock tower up at the top. This is the Wrigley Building. The Wrigley Building was constructed to be the Wrigley Candy Company's headquarters. It was completed in two fell swoops. The first tower, the one with the clock, was completed in 1921. Second tower was completed in 1924. This building is designed in a style called Spanish Revival. Revivalist styles harken back to ancient cultures or eras in history in order to honor them and bring them back to life. The Wrigley Building is specifically modeled after the Giralda Tower in Seville, Spain. The Wrigley Building is surfaced with 250,000 glazed terracotta tiles. They are very delicate, as am I. They have to be hand washed once a year, as do I. These tiles, they come in 6 different shades. They start a little bit darker at the building's base, and then they gradually get lighter as you go toward the top to naturally draw your eye up to the clock. That was the first commercial office building on planet Earth outfitted with central air conditioning. Weird fun fact. Straight in front of us, you can see the second tallest building on the Chicago skyline today, and that is the Trump International Hotel and Tower. This building was completed in 2009, designed by a very famous architect named Adrian Smith. Adrian Smith started his career in Chicago before he went on to design the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, which is currently the tallest building on the planet. The Burj Khalifa is about as tall as if you took 2 of these and stacked them directly on top of each other. He's now designing a building in Saudi Arabia that will be nearly the height of 3 of these. This building is designed in a style called contextualism. It's in conversation with its context or location. The 3 patio setbacks, as you go up the side of the building, each of those patio setbacks matches the height of an iconic structure nearby. First patio matches the height of the Wrigley Building behind it. Second patio matches the height of the Marina City corncob-shaped towers 2 doors down. Third patio matches the height of the AMA Plaza, the Black Box building coming up right next door. This is Adrian Smith's way of recognizing that he could not have put this building in this spot if not for the others that were around it first. The AMA Plaza, this black box building coming up on the right-hand side, this was completed in 1973, designed by the German-born architect Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. Ludwig Mies van der Rohe is considered to be the father of modernism. Modern-style architecture looks just like this. It's just the skeletal structure of the building's design. Ludwig Mies van der Rohe believed that the beauty of the building lies in the mathematics and the precision of the engineering. So why would you want to cover that up with any kind of decorative details? Next on the right are 2 of the most heavily photographed structures in our city, and these are the twin curving corncob-shaped towers of Marina City. Marina City is an entire complex completed in 1967, designed by a student of Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. His name was Bertrand Goldberg. The entire complex was a ploy to attract residents back to the central business district of Chicago, which we call the Loop, because of the shape that the public transit train system makes around the downtown area. No one was living in the Loop in the late 50s, early 60s. Goldberg wanted to draw them back, so he was going to give them all of the resources of an entire neighborhood in a single complex. Housing up at the top, parking right below, office tower connected behind, movie theater, corner store, dry cleaner, restaurants, retail space, even a place to park your boat. And everything that you could possibly need all in one place. It was like a city within a city, and it was super successful in drawing residents back to the Loop area. Over on the left-hand side of the boat, you can see portions of the relatively new Chicago Riverwalk. The Chicago Riverwalk was completed in 2016. It spans 1.25 miles. It can get you from Lake Michigan all the way back to Lake Street. It is divided into distinct sections at each of the bridges, each with their own personality and function. There's cafes, public art, places to fish, and plenty of places to relax and enjoy the outdoors. Coming up on the right, you see a low-lying red brick building, another clock tower up at the top of this one. This is the Murdock Building from 1914. It was designed by George C. Nimmons, and as we go past the building, you will notice that it is asymmetrical. There are 6 bays of windows on one side, only 5 on the other. What happened here? You see, back in the 1930s, city planners decided that they wanted to expand one of the streets coming up above our heads. They wanted to make LaSalle Street wider. How did they make space to do that? They just shaved a bay of windows off the Murdock Building and closed up that western face to match. Today, this building is home to the offices of the Encyclopedia Britannica Company. The Encyclopedia Britannica Company still exists, and that might be the most surprising fact of this entire tour. Across the water from the Murdock Building is the present-day River Theater portion of the Chicago Riverwalk. However, this is actually a pretty somber Chicago landmark. This is the site of the deadliest maritime disaster in Great Lakes history. On the morning of July 24th, 1915, 2,500 employees and family members of the Western Electric Company were boarding the SS Eastland, headed to a company picnic in Michigan City, Indiana. The boat was very top-heavy with extra lifeboats, per regulation set in place following the Titanic sinking 3 years earlier. Ballast tank stabilization efforts failed and the boat actually tipped on its side, trapping 800 people below. There is a memorial to the SS Eastland disaster up at street level. Coming up on the right, a block ahead of us, you see a giant limestone building, big cream-colored building. It has a green roof, lots of golden elements on its face. This giant limestone building is called Merchandise Mart. Merchandise Mart was constructed in 1930 as the wholesale warehouse for the Marshall Fields department store. At that time in 1930, this was the largest building on the planet in terms of square footage. The building is enormous. It has over 4.2 million square feet of space inside. At different points in history, Merchandise Mart has had its own zip code, 60654, its own fire station. To this day, it has its own public transit train stop. You could take the brown or the purple line train directly in and out of Merchandise Mart. The building is designed in a style called Art Deco. Art Deco style architecture is marked by vertical racing stripes up a polished Indiana limestone face, deep inset windows that reinforce the look of those racing stripes, metallic elements on the building's facade that create a sense of rhythm when you are looking at them, and stair-stepped edges up at the building's crown. In a nod to the building's retail roots, you see these green head statues along the river's edge. These are the princes of retail. Men such as Marshall Field, Aaron Montgomery Ward, Woolworth, Wanamaker, and more princes. We are now entering into an area of the Chicago River called Wolf Point. Wolf Point is where the 3 branches of the Chicago River converge. This is where we originally built our city up around. At the time of our city's founding on March 4th, 1837, Wolf Point was home to 3 taverns, a hotel, a drugstore, a church, and a theater company. Wolf Point has come a long way since 1837, as we all have, but it has particularly blossomed in the last 5 years. For example, straight in front of us, you can see a curved blue glass building. It looks like a hot pocket. This building is called River Point. It was completed in 2017, designed by Pickard Chilton, and that arch at the bottom is actually structural. Notice the portholes in the white plaza below. Those are actually exhaust fans, as there are Metra and Amtrak passenger trains running underneath the base of this building. When they went to design the structural supports for River Point, they could not dig them straight into the ground. They would run into the railroad tracks. They had to keep them above. They set them at an angle, and then they finished it off with that parabolic arch, which also serves as the rain gutter for the entire facade of the building. Is it raining? I don't like that. I'll say it. In front of River Point, you can see a spiraling red sculpture. This was designed by the world-famous Spanish architect Santiago Calatrava. This is the only Calatrava work that we have in our city. He designed a building that was going to be constructed here called the Chicago Spire. The Chicago Spire was going to be over 2,000 feet tall. It would have been the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere. However, that project was killed by the 2008 financial crisis. Today, the Chicago Spire project is quite literally a giant hole in the ground near Navy Pier. If you were on my boss's tour, he would call that the Great Architectural Sad. However, in my pretty vast experience, architecture is not something that you should be sad about. If my boss was on this tour, I would not make that joke. As we curve into the North Branch of the Chicago River, you can see the oldest building of our tour coming on the left. That's this peachy kind of pink colored building. This peachy pink building is called Fulton House. It was originally constructed in 1898. At that time, it did not look like this. It did not have any windows. You see, Fulton House was constructed as a cold storage warehouse for raw meat. Chicago has a very rich meat packing history. Had to come up with different ways to keep all those cuts cold so they wouldn't go bad before we could ship them out around the United States. One of the ways that we did that was by constructing these giant building-sized refrigerators and then just stacking them stories and stories high with raw animal carcasses. It's a fabulous mental image for your Sunday evening. Fast forward to the late 1970s, and an architect named Harry Weiss decides he wants to convert Fulton House into 106 condominiums. Before he could do any construction on the building, he had to thaw it out for 3 whole months. Then he had to haul out 500 semi-truckloads worth of cork and horsehair that had been used to insulate the walls of the building. You can see the balconies up on Fulton House are as deep as those original walls were thick. Next on the left after Fulton House, you can see a funky slanted white structure. These are the 4 river cottages. This is a set of 4 unique townhomes completed in 1989. These was also designed by Harry Weiss, the same architect behind Fulton House. The river cottages represent a style of architecture called Post-Modernism. If modernism was the minimalist black box design of Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, this is its off-the-wall rebel child of the 80s and 90s. Postmodernism is marked by wacky and whimsical design elements on the building's facade. It is the scrunchies and shoulder pads of architecture. 3 of the 4 original families still reside in the river cottages today. They purchased their homes back in 1990 for about $250,000. The 4th sold in 2015 for $2.25 million. As you can see, real estate along the Chicago River has absolutely skyrocketed in value over the last 30 years, thanks in large part to the fact that we're using the river in more of a recreational way than we ever have in our city's history. Now, the captain is going to be turning the boat around here on the North Branch of the Chicago River before we head back into Wolf Point and check out much, much more of the South Branch of the Chicago River. We're going to take a little break. This is an excellent time for you guys to visit Jamie at the bar if you would like to get a refreshment, whatever you need to do. I'll be back on the microphone in about 2 or 3 minutes to talk about bridges, including that bridge that was sticking up straight in the air. If you're moving about the boat, be careful in case these raindrops made it a little slippery.
And a white spot in the sky is the moon. A full moon, but cloudy. It looks clear because of the camera, but it's actually cloudy. Now back to the tour.
The city of Chicago is very famous for our movable bridges. There are 37 drawbridges in the city of Chicago. That is the most in the United States and the second in the world after only Amsterdam. Chicago's bridges are designed in a style called trunnion bascule. Bascule being the French term for seesaw or teeter-totter. This means that our bridges open and close with a weight and counterweight technology. It's all very precise. The bridges have to be recalibrated for their weight every time they are even painted so that they can open and close correctly. This bridge, which I'll explain in a moment, it's a great example of that trunnion bascule style because you can see the bridge's counterweight exposed. That giant block of concrete, the yellowing block of concrete in the back, it shows you just how much weight it takes to open and close these bridges. This bridge here, this is the Carroll Avenue Bridge. It was built in 1908. At that time, it was the longest and heaviest lift bridge in the entire world. It was a rail bridge. It had train tracks running over it. That railroad is no longer operational, neither is the Carroll Avenue Bridge. However, it is a historic landmark, so we will not be knocking it down. We still open and close it just once a year, just to prove that we still can. Pretty straightforward. At each of the bridges, you will notice unique bridge houses. The bridge house is where the bridge tender goes up to operate the opening and the closing of the bridges. In Chicago's very early days, there was always a bridge tender out inside the bridge house in case a random tall ship came through. We really don't get any random tall ships anymore, so we only open the bridges when there is a planned bridge opening. We only send the bridge tenders up into their house. For example, we do that in the spring and in the fall. Perhaps you saw yesterday morning, if you were walking around downtown, they did a planned bridge run where they open all of the bridges in succession so that people can bring their sailboats out from storage and into the marinas along the lake. As we pass back through Wolf Point, it's a great view down the main branch of the river. Great photo op. Always like to point that one out. Coming up on our right-hand side, you see a reflective glass skyscraper that looks like a sharpened pencil or a tuning fork or an arrow sticking into the ground. This is 150 North Riverside. It was also completed in 2017, same as River Point. This one was designed by the firm Gatch Partners. Their offices are headquartered in the building. However, the primary tenant of this building is the Hyatt Hotel Corporation. Gatch Partners, when they were designing 150 North Riverside, they had a similar conundrum as the designers of River Point. They had the river on one side of their plot and the railroad tracks on the other. This left them with an area of space only 39 feet wide upon which they could construct the base of the building. How does it possibly stand upright? This building is supported by a series of 16 structural support beams called caissons. Caissons are giant steel and concrete beams that are about 10 feet in diameter. They run from the bedrock, 125 feet below ground, all the way up to the very, very top of the building. Everything else just cantilevers off that center spine. One of my favorite parts about this building is a little bit vain, and that's the fact that you can see the reflection of our boat going by in its funny shape. Next on the right is the Boeing Headquarters. Super fun place to work over the last couple of years. Sometimes I think about cutting out that joke, and then something happens at Boeing that really just keeps it fresh. It's totally out of my control. The Boeing Building was constructed in 1990. It was designed by the firm Perkins & Will. It was originally constructed to be the headquarters for the Morton Salt Company. Morton has since moved over into the Hot Pocket-shaped River Point building, and Boeing moved in here. However, if you take a look up at the top of the building as we come out from under this bridge, you will see a panel of 6 giant holes opening that rooftop up to the sky. Now, if you were designing a building for a table salt company and you put holes in the top, what are you trying to replicate? A salt shaker. You see, architecture, nothing to be sad about. We are now headed into what I like to call Art Deco Canyon. There's going to be Art Deco on both sides of the boat. Gives you a feel for the opulence and the optimism of the style, which was popularized in the roaring 1920s in the United States in the Jazz Age. Coming up on the right is 2 Riverside Plaza, originally the Chicago Daily News Building. The Chicago Daily News Building was completed in 1929, designed by the firm Halliburton & Root, and it was the first building in Chicago constructed facing the water of the Chicago River. Unfortunately, for many, many years, this water was super polluted. It was just shipping barges making their way through the sludge. People did not want to see what was going on down here. Most of the buildings went up with their backs to the water. The architects here, they were like, hey, maybe one day they're going to clean that water up. Maybe we'll want to watch the boats go by. Now they have that fabulous open air plaza to enjoy because of their foresight. Now this next series of buildings on the right-hand side of the boat, it's a great example of how architecture evolved in the United States throughout the 20th century. How did we go from the over-the-top fanciful detailing of Art Deco in the 20s and 30s to the very simple minimalism of modernism in the 50s and 60s? It is important to remember what happened to the United States economy in 1929. Stock market crash, ensuing Great Depression, quick entrance into World War II thereafter. All of these things left a giant gap in American construction. Put up almost no commercial office buildings from about 1934 until about 1957. When we did return to construction, the designers have totally different priorities than their predecessors. These are children of the Great Depression. They're thrifty and frugal. They just want to get the buildings up quickly and cost effectively so we can focus on the business that would happen inside. These twin black box buildings on the right, this is Gateway Center 1 and 2 from 1965 and 1967. As we moved into the 1970s, things loosened up a little bit. Instead of just designing black box buildings, we started to design gray box buildings, brown box buildings, white box buildings, like Gateway Center number 3, completed in 1971. White box buildings, gray box buildings, your occasional red box building. These represent a style of architecture called international style. International style is super easy to remember. You could pick that building up and put it anywhere in the world at that time and it would still make sense. It's not in conversation with its location whatsoever. It was not until the 1980s and 90s that we started to see those more creative architectural styles emerge again, like Post-Modernism, the wacky and whimsical, or the site-specific contextualism, like Gateway 4, which is the curving green glass building coming up on the right-hand side. That curve mimics the curve of the Chicago River below, and there is a pinched facade to the green glass windows. This creates a rippled reflection, makes it look as though we just pulled that building up from the bottom of the water. This makes the most sense right where it's located on the banks of the Chicago River. It was completed in 1983. A little bit closer to us on the right, you see a smaller black box building. This one has big X's on its side. This is the former Chicago Commodities Exchange Center. Those crisscrossing trusses, they are load-bearing. They put the entire weight of the structure on its outside skeleton. That means you don't have to leave any space inside for big structural support pillars. This design is perfect for something where you want to have a big open space inside, like the Commodities trading floor. This design style is a Chicago original and made its world debut in 1969 with the completion of the John Hancock Center on Michigan Avenue. Back over on the left, you see another great example of black box style modernism coming into view. This is 300 South Wacker. It was actually not included on our tours for many, many years. So we already had so many great examples of modernism to show you. We didn't really need another one. This building's not facing the river. They got left out. Well, they got very tired of being left out. So in 2014, they put a map on themselves to put themselves on the map. This mural is a map of the Chicago River. That red Lego piece looking thing up at the top that marks "You Are Here." Blows my mind how one simple work of art transforms the entire building into something unforgettable on our skyline, something that everybody talks about.
That's amazing.
Back over on the
Very
right, you
creative.
see another giant limestone building coming into view. This one might look familiar to you as the Gotham City Bank, robbed by the Joker at the beginning of The Dark Knight. This is the old Chicago Post Office. The old Chicago Post Office was completed in 1932. At that time, it was the largest post office in the entire world. You might be thinking, hey Courtney, what do you guys need with such a big post office? It is important to remember that Chicago was the headquarters location of many different mail order catalog companies. Sears Roebuck, Montgomery Ward, Marshall Fields. All these retail giants were located here, so we had all our catalogs, shipments, mail that needed to go out. The building was constructed with a giant hole in the middle to accommodate the interstate highway system that runs right through. However, the interstate highway system was not constructed until 20 years after the building went up. That reflects a great deal of foresight regarding the popularity of the automobile. Fast forward to the 1990s, mail order catalogs aren't that popular anymore. We didn't need such a big post office. We built a smaller one right next door, and this building sat empty until 2016 when it was purchased by developers who are now funneling over $600 million into its renovation. This building is becoming high-end office space. A couple of the highest profile leases went to Uber and Walgreens. This is now the Walgreens World Headquarters. The building's about 25% occupied at this point. The project will also feature a 4-acre rooftop park and a new portion of the Chicago Riverwalk when all is said and done. As we travel down the south branch of the Chicago River, I want to talk to you about one of the most pivotal moments in our city's history as we are nearing its origin point. To do this, we need to go back in time exactly 150 years. Around 9 p.m. on the night of October 8th, 1871, a neighbor came by to alert Mrs. Catherine O'Leary of a fire in the barn behind her house over on Deco Street. It's about 6 blocks to the southwest of where we are right now. Today, that spot is home to the Chicago Fire Academy because irony is not dead. The city had rarely been drier. They hadn't seen rain since the 4th of July, and this is October. Plus, the young city, only about 35 years old at this point, had been constructed almost entirely, even the streets and sidewalks, out of wood. Strong winds from the southwest blew the flames from Mrs. Catherine O'Leary's barn into the heart of the downtown area. Over the next 30 hours, an area of our city, 1 mile wide and 4 miles long, burned to the ground. In a great deal of fire literature, authors try to describe the melee, the chaos, the fury of it all. And a detail that comes up again and again is that pregnant women were launching into premature labor at the sight of it all. One estimate has as many as 800 babies born prematurely as the Great Chicago Fire burned. Whether this detail is true or simply these authors trying to bestow gravitas on the situation, I think we get the picture. Over 18,000 structures were destroyed on that night. 18,000. It was absolutely devastating. However, it did give us the ultimate opportunity to rebuild and fix all the mistakes we had made the first time around. Architects and engineers flocked to the city of Chicago in the years following the Great Chicago Fire. They were seizing upon that super rare opportunity to construct so many brand new buildings on already valuable property. One of the architects working in Chicago at this time, his name was William LeBaron Jenney, and he decided to put the weight of the structure on an inner steel frame instead of a load-bearing stone wall, and thus the world's first skyscraper was born. Some historians argue that the Great Chicago Fire is one of the most important events of all time because it led to the vertical development of our urban centers. If not for the fire, it's hard to say when we would have started building our cities up instead of just out. 22 years after the Great Chicago Fire, we felt as though we had rebuilt enough to show off a little bit. So we bid to host the 1893 World's Colombian Exposition, or the 1893 World's Fair. The process of bidding to host this fair is where we get our nickname, the Windy City. You see, we were talking a big game to the World's Fair Committee. We said, come on down to Paris on the Prairie. Everything is perfect here. Nothing ever goes wrong. A couple of New York City journalists weren't quite buying what we were selling. They published an op-ed piece. They said, why would you give the fair to those hillbillies down on the prairie in Chicago? They're full of hot air. They tell long-winded stories. They blow wind. Windy City is about how we talk. It's about how our politicians and our city officials have been known to tell long-winded stories, inflate the truth. But the joke's on everyone else in this case, because we won the bid and we hosted the 1893 World's Colombian Exposition. This World's Fair was a huge coming out moment for the city of Chicago. It established us as a global capital of arts and culture in addition to being a titan of industry. A lot of our favorite things got their debut at this World's Fair, including Cracker Jack, shredded wheat, juicy fruit gum, Quaker Oats, the zipper, all your favorite stuff. This is where the world saw the very first chocolate brownie. A woman named Mrs. Bertha Palmer, matriarch of the Palmer House Hotel. She was having her chefs pack lunches for fairgoers every day, and she told them to bake a cake that was dense enough that people could just eat it with their hands while they walked around the fair. Thus, the brownie was born. This fair is also where something called Pabst Select beer from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, won a blue ribbon. Maybe the most fun fact of all. The chief architect behind the fair, his name was Daniel Burnham, and he wanted to create a glowing utopia that reminded people of ancient Greece or ancient Rome, and he decided to use more electricity than had ever been seen in the world at that time. Imagine arriving from a rural hometown, maybe you've never seen even a single electric light bulb. You arrive in Chicago and the entire city was lit up in the dark. It was absolutely awe-inspiring. After the World's Fair of 1893, Daniel Burnham went on to publish the 1909 Plan of Chicago. This is considered to be a pretty pivotal document in modern city planning. It inspired other city planners all over the world to create cities that were both navigable and accessible, but also very beautiful to be in. This means things like a street grid system to get around with ease, 18-foot alleyways between each of the buildings, great place to hide our trash, expanded park systems, expanded highway systems, and maximum recreational use of any waterfronts. His work sparked the City Beautiful movement all over the world. As the captain spins the boat, you have a beautiful view of the downtown skyline. Definitely be sure to grab a photo of that. This also is unfortunately last call for the bar. The bathrooms will still be open for the rest of the ride, but he's going to need to start closing up the bar. So if you did want to get a snack or a refreshment, now is the time to do so.
That is a beautiful skyline.
This limestone structure with the twin smokestacks now on the left-hand side of our boat. This is the Union Station Power Plant. It was constructed in the early 1930s as part of the larger Union train station system. Today, it is considered to be one of the most endangered buildings in the city of Chicago. It's currently owned by Amtrak. They're not doing anything with it, so we have begun Section 106 hearings, which are the legal proceedings to determine if we will make this building a historic landmark or if it will face the wrecking ball. Hard to say. The building is surrounded on 3 sides by rail yards and on the 4th by the Chicago River. What would we turn it into? I was thinking swim-up bar, and that's exactly why they don't defer to me on decisions such as this. A little bit about the Chicago River in general. The Chicago River is not very deep. It's only about 24 feet deep at any given point. The north branch of the Chicago River originates in a floodplain up near Wilmette, Illinois, near the Chicago Botanic Gardens. The main branch of the Chicago River comes in from Lake Michigan, which you will see very clearly at the end of our ride. The south branch of the Chicago River continues south before it meets the Des Plaines River, then the Illinois River, and becomes part of the Mississippi River system. The Chicago River's connection to the Mississippi is why we picked this spot for our town, very advantageous for travel and trade. The main branch of the Chicago River maintains that bright bluish-greenish color. That is natural. That is from all of the lake water coming in at the Chicago Harbor locks. That is the bright bluish-greenish color of Lake Michigan. It doesn't really make the turn into the other branches at Wolf Point. Diving back into the architecture, on the right we see a curving concrete structure. Might remind you of the Marina City corncob-shaped towers, and that is because it is the same architect. This was Bertrand Goldberg's second attempt at a city within a city. This is River City. It was completed in 1986. In addition to being an architect, Bertrand Goldberg was something of a utopian sociologist. He believed that it was the responsibility of the residential real estate developer to provide resources for the residents in their home complex, things like childcare facilities, medical clinics, occupational training centers, even law libraries, all in that home complex. Underneath River City, is a year-round marina. There's bubblers under the water that keep it from freezing. You can keep your boat here all year long. The Chicago River itself will freeze from time to time, usually only a handful of times every winter, and we like to get the Chicago Fire Department out pretty quickly with their boats to break up the ice and keep this passageway navigable down to the Mississippi. Straight in front of us, a little bit to the right, you can see a black building. It has a big white frame and a series of rectangular gray balconies popping out of the side. Some people say that it looks like it was written in Morse code. It was not. This is actually an example of contextualism. This is 235 Van Buren. It was completed in 2010, designed by the firm Perkins & Will, which is the same firm that designed the Boeing Building. The context that this building is in conversation with is actually the traffic on Ida B. Wells Drive below. It's meant to replicate cars stuck in traffic. It's actually very beautiful. If you find yourself caught in a jam, you could just take a look up at 235 Van Buren and see your situation reflected back at you in a very meaningful way. Further over to the right in the distance, you see another great example of Art Deco, vertical racing stripes up a limestone face. This one has a big statue lit up blue at the